Okay, everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the very last panel today. I hope you're still awake. I hope you've had some coffee. And we will have a panel now on the Norwegian Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I'd just like to say that I'm very, very happy to have with us Anne Henriette from the Sámi Parliament and Felicia Saraskre from the Bergen Sámi Association, maybe? Bergen Sámi, yeah. And Sondre Pettersen, who most of you met over lunch with a beautiful joik. And I will ask them later to introduce themselves more thoroughly. But before we get into the actual conversation, how many of you are familiar with the Norwegian Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Have you heard about it? You heard about it? You know what? That's probably more than the people who knew about this commission in this country when the commission's work started in 2018. We did a survey, and only one year after the commission had started its work, only 1 out of 25% of the population in this country had actually heard about the commission. And the last time we had a survey, which was 1 year before the commission finished its work, 75% had heard about it. So you're in good company, actually, if you don't know what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is about. I'll just give you some very, very brief facts. It was established by the Norwegian Parliament in 2018, which is 5 years ago. It had 12 commissioners. Most of them were academics. There was one retired bishop, but most of them were academics. Some of them were academics from Sámi, the Sámi community, or had backgrounds and academic competence in doing research on the Sámi or the Kven or the Norwegian Finns. But basically an academic commission. It was headed by the former head of the Christian Democratic Party. So he was actually a professional politician. And this group of people worked intensely for 5 years, collecting personal histories from about almost 800 people, 760 people. They did a lot of archival work, and they concluded their mission this year. They handed over the report on the 1st of June, so only 2 months ago. The mandate of the commission was threefold. It was to investigate the historical wrongs committed against the indigenous Sámi, as well as 3 national minorities, the Kven, Norwegian Finns, and the Forest Finns. So one part was to document the process of assimilation, or what we call Norwegianization, taking place formally as a state policy between 1850 and 1950, roughly. The second aim of the commission was to look into the long-term repercussions of the policies of assimilation all the way up to the present. And the third part of the mandate was to come up with recommendations for reconciliation, because this was the main aim of the commission, was to create reconciliation between the state and the indigenous people and minority groups identified by the commission, but also between the majority population and the minority groups. And before I open up for the panel, I just want to show you the commission's report. Somebody asked me in the break, did you carry this all the way? This is the document. It's about 700 pages. It weighs about 2 kilos. It's huge. So I don't know how accessible this particular document is going to be in its physical format, but it's online. It's in Norwegian primarily, but it also has an introduction in, I think, 8 languages. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Sámi languages in Kven, English, and Norwegian. So the summary is available in many languages. The commission has worked also in many languages. It has collected personal stories in whichever language the person giving the story wanted to tell the story in. So there have been, what I want to say is that the commission has had a lot of language competence. to accommodate for people speaking the way they want to speak, either in written form or orally. So these personal stories have been a very, significant part of the Commission's report. So the main aim is reconciliation. But before we get into that part, I just want to ask you what you think of the importance of the Commission. Has it been important in Norwegian society? And I ask you first because the Sámi Parliament was the institution that actually proposed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the first place. So Anna Henriette.
Thank you. For those of you who weren't here a bit earlier, my name is Nilo Ulheika Birana Anna Henriette. It's quite a bit of a mouthful, so I will answer to Anna as well. Well, the Truth and Reconciliation is, of course, in the words, such noble words, but then the question becomes, okay, is this the truth? Because we can talk about micro and macro truths, right? Because you have the personal individual stories that were collected, and it has also taken a look at like the broader, the politics, the systems that were set in place to Norwegianize both the Sámi people and the three minorities here mentioned. And then you could say, okay, we of course celebrated when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started, and it was announced that it would be started. We were present in the when it was delivered to the Norwegian Parliament, 1st of June. But we are in a position where we're supposed to talk about truth and reconciliation when there are ongoing violations of human rights in the Fosen, for the Fosen Samis, and with new similar cases on the horizon. So that puts it in quite a grim light, I must say. And it's also, I think it's actually 2.2 kilos. Yeah, of a lot of pain in there. But what it showed is the totality of the picture. And it also documented, for instance, Sámi children being taken from their families as far south as Røros, which I think is not something that the majority, like we have like a Norwegian, it's not something you automatically think. You think Sámi people, okay, they have reindeers, they are far up north, and they wear their gaktis all the time. So it kind of gives more of a nuanced picture, but I'm pretty sure that the general majority population will not read that. So there's for me, for this to have importance, then it has to become a document also for the majority population, which means that government and school has to be able to take that 2.2 kilos and make it understandable in some form for most people. And are we able to do that? Not today, but maybe someday. And I think I'm going on now on a spiral where I'm not quite sure where I'll end this. So I will give the floor on to my fellow panelists here, and just lastly say from the Sámi Parliament, we are, of course, for us it's very important to take this piece of this report and make it available for the Sámi population, but also give the Sámi population a chance to speak to what they think about the report. And I'm speaking for the Sámi Parliament in Norway and for this, the policies and the stories touching upon the Sámi, because I cannot speak on behalf of the Kvens or the Norwegian Finns or the Forest Finns. So yeah, and we have a hearing right now, and we'll discuss this and have plenary sessions where of course this report will be debated, but it's still really early. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will call you Anne, to be, for the sake of simplicity. I happen to know that both Felicia and Sondre have been involved in reading the Commission's recommendations and thinking about what kind of response you're going to give to the Sámi Parliament in this round of hearing, as we call høringsrunde in Norwegian. So maybe, would you like to start? Felicia, what do you think about the recommendations? And, what do you think are the most important recommendations, both from a sort of national point of view, but also maybe personally?
You're asking about the Commission's recommendations for reconciliation in the report. Yeah, I wouldn't say I've done reading it. I'm in the process of reading it. It needs reading, rereading, because it's a political document. And as a political document, it's not accessible. I would call it vague. It says something that sounds grand when you read it up, but when you try to understand what it actually means, it's not that easy. So I read this in Norwegian, of course, so translating on the go. The Kven, Forest Finn and Sámi societies needs to get a better opportunity to take part in developing knowledge and teach this knowledge of their own history and culture. Sounds grand. How are we doing that? How is this 2.2 kilos of political language a part of doing that? I would say that it's a good recommendation, but it's only a good recommendation if we who are actually partaking in the culture, as the Bergen Sammensjärvi is a big part of here. We are trying to organize language cafes where people can speak Sámi, because where are you supposed to speak Sámi if you're not living in Kven, or if you're not living in Finnmark, or one of the Sámi, if your family isn't all Sámi speaking, if you're trying to take your language back, like me, I can hardly speak a few words. It's my great-grandparents could speak Sámi. They were taught that they would harm their children if they taught the language further on, so they didn't. Who would harm their children after all? So I'm told a couple of generations later that the best thing I can do for my children is to teach them Sámi, bring back the language. It's hard. It's really hard, because most of us, this commission is so proud of the 800 stories. How many people are we? They estimate we are 20,000 Sámi people in Norway, maybe, something around that. But that's the people who have an acknowledged Sámi identity, who decided that they would like to vote in the Sámi Parliament. So what about my daughter? She's 3 years old. She doesn't vote. Her father is from Bergen. Is she Sámi? Does she have a right to history, her culture? How is this document supposed to be something for her? Only if this ends up being suggested in something, well, it's in money. It needs to be money in the end. We need money to be able to write, to publish, to create these opportunities, places. What I would like to suggest actually is that there is created some sort of funding for organizations like my own to actually have a space in the largest towns of Norway, also the ones not the biggest ones, not just Oslo, not just in Finnmark, but that all the larger cities gets to have a place that is a Sámi house, a place where we can go in and teach this story, where we can meet, where we can talk in Sámi and Kven. Because the truth is that my family isn't just Sámi, they're also Kven. The stories are complex. My grandfather is born Sámi. They were poor, so he grew up with a Kven family. Spoke 3 languages until he was 6 years old enough to understand that the grown-ups were laughing at him because he wasn't talking correct. He told me he stayed silent until he can speak proper Norwegian. It takes time to heal this thing, to reconciliate what's even within one family. Who are we? Are we Kven? Are we Sámi? Are we Norwegian? Am I not Norwegian? Are my daughter West Norwegian? The only place where we can reconcile these things is not in ideas, not in books, it's among people, from face to face. where we can talk to each other, and we need money to be able to create those spaces. That's what I have to say.
Maybe I can just follow up on that directly. So this is one of the main points for me as well. What I wanted to talk about today is the complexity of identity, and the danger of failing to see that complexity and see it as black and white. I think that for myself, my story is that in the Sámi area that I'm from, Moska, Votna, Ulsfjorden, 80%, 75 to 80% spoke Sámi or Kven in the 1891, and then 50, 60 years later, the language collapsed completely. So I'm also a new Sámi, which is the term for all the Sámis taking back their identity and language. And it's and one of the findings of their report is that the discrimination inside the Sámi community towards new Sámis, for example, is also growing. So there are, and of course, then I'm both Norwegian and Sámi, and live with Kven roots. I'm also much more than that. I'm a brother, a son, I'm a church organist, and I'm a friend, and all of those things is my identity, not only my ethnic identity. And this is really important, I think, that we don't view ourselves through one lens or one group of people, because ultimately this is a cliche and it shouldn't need to be said, but I feel like in this day and age it really needs to be said that we are in one boat. So in terms of climate crisis, that's the final analysis. We are one people and one and together with other living creatures and the nature itself. So this is like the foundations for me is how do I navigate this, acknowledging the wrongs of the past, acknowledging my different ethnicities, but at the same time working towards reconciliation together with the Norwegians and together with both my Norwegian side and my Sámi side. And I think music and art here has a really important role because it really has the possibility to bring people together. And one of my main areas is to work towards joik not being indigenous music that creates further separation, but that somehow, and that somehow is a really big question right now, can bring people together. I think it's a great gateway into the culture and into knowledge of the culture. And there are many hard discussions about who are allowed to joik, why, what does it mean to be a good joiker? And in one way, you could say that you need to grow up inside the Sámi society or in a family to know the really depth of it. But in another way, I'm still finally, after 32 years on this globe, acknowledging that I'm doing joik in the way that I am doing it. And I think there's a real power in joik to bring people together. And this is what I want to work towards. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think you've touched upon a whole range of important issues, and it's very difficult to do this sort of chronologically and in a scientific manner to discuss these things because they're so interconnected. But I think one thing that you touched upon is who is allowed to be a Sámi? Who is allowed to identify yourself as a Sámi? What does that take? And I know that there are big discussions internally in the Sámi community today and splits between those who believe that, to be a Sámi, you have to be able to control the language and speak the language. And, who is allowed to wear traditional costumes, who is allowed to be defined as a Sámi, who is allowed to vote. And this is a big discussion. And this is actually something that the Commission has picked up on. The need not to reconcile only the majority and the minority population, but also internal reconciliation in specific communities. This is one of the things that they have picked up on in their conversations that they have had with people and in the hundreds of public meetings that they have conducted across the country. Another thing that I just wanted to mention is that we didn't say this at the beginning, we should have, but one of the big findings of the Commission that is commonly known in the country is that there has been, because of the linguistic and cultural repression, many people have lost their language and their culture. And there has been a revival among the younger generation, which you are representing today, in digging out your own roots and your, what we call the sort of the generational tree, you know, figure out who your grandparents and great-grandparents were, because over the years, many people have lost their languages, the culture, but they've also lost their names, which means that you may have to go 3 or 4 generations back in time to figure out what your family name was. So today you have the split between the people who sort of have been Sámi or Kven all their lives and they know it, and the younger population who are discovering who they really are and trying to reclaim some of this heritage. So it's a very sort of complex picture nationally, and you know much more about this than I do. But this is one of the big challenges when we speak about reconciliation. It's like, who is reconciling with what and who? And the commission itself has been kind of vague when it comes to what is reconciliation. And, you know, reconciliation processes have been going on in many different countries. Many of you who sit here today come from countries where they have a truth and reconciliation commissions. I'm looking at people from South Africa, Guatemala, Colombia, and many, many other countries. The Norwegian Commission decided to tailor the concept of reconciliation to the Norwegian context and the Norwegian welfare, democratic welfare state. And they have defined reconciliation taking place on 3 dimensions: at the individual level, at the group level, and at the political level. And just to simplify the report horribly, they have come with recommendations of reconciliation within 5 pillars. And I'll just mention those very briefly. One has to do with knowledge and dissemination. And this has to do with the fact that most Norwegians have been ignorant about the policies of assimilation and Norwegianization of both the Sámi, but also of these national minority groups. So increasing the knowledge in the population is one pillar, if you want, with lots of sub-recommendations. Then there is another pillar, which you have touched upon already, which has to do with language. The taking back the language and developing the language at all levels, from kindergarten all the way to, you know, higher education. A third pillar is culture, which I think you can speak a lot about. Then there is a 4th pillar, which is conflict prevention, because there is a lot of hate speech, discrimination in Norwegian society against these groups. And finally, there is a 5th pillar, which has to do with the implementation of rules and regulation, which means that there are a lot of rules and regulations and rights protection on paper, but there is a huge gap, implementation gap. And I want you to comment on that, because I know that you touched upon this in the former panel that we were in. So can you say something about, you know, the discrepancy between giving people rights and then not giving them the resources, which you touched upon, Felicia, to actually exercise these rights?
Yes, I will come to the implementation gap. This is, for me as well, such a big theme, and it touches upon so much. So, first of all, I think it's important to understand that a lot of the Sámi societies are built, the civil society is built, like Bergen Sámisjärvi, kindergartens, Sámi schools have often been built voluntarily by the Sámi people. So the institutions that are found today in the Sámi society have often started as like a grassroots movement that we are struggling hard to fund. So the Sámi service, like Felicia here is representing, are immensely important. And they also create that space for all those voices that aren't the first that don't have the safety inside themselves to cry on the barricades, or that are not sure if they feel at home in the Sámi society, or because what we also have to, I'm sorry that I'm starting with this, but it's important context, because 1% of the state budget was used on Norwegianization of these groups. And today, less than 1,000 of the same budget is going to trying to repair the damages made. So you have a population or a lot of people that don't feel Norwegian enough. They may not feel Kven enough. They don't feel Sámi enough. So how do you kind of navigate that kind of society? So the Sámi Parliament actually had this internal reconciliation it has been debated in plenary sessions because, as you say, when you steal the culture and language from people, you also create splits and conflict. And when something is so scarce, it becomes something that you are both afraid to touch upon, but also afraid to lose and afraid to give. So I think that the social ramifications have not been touched upon sufficiently. And that goes to the implementation gap as well, because you have given some rights on paper, especially on the Norwegian side. ILO 169 has been ratified here. Sámi children on paper, at least if they are many enough, have the right to learn Sámi at school. But we still have the situation where the rights aren't given in praxis. And that's, for me, is one of the most important things this report shows, that even though there are a lot of rules and regulations for us, they are pretty on paper, and that's pretty much it. So on a political level, if you're talking about reconciliation, that's probably a really good place to start. And you mentioned money, and people would say it's a cliche, but some institutions are always underfunded if you see them next to their Norwegian, we don't have a Sámi National Museum for one. And the entire Sámi Parliament, which is in charge of giving culture money for projects that Sámi service hold, that give money for municipalities to work with both Sámi language in their municipality, that give money for the handicrafts, to the I'm starting to be language confused now, so my Sámi is coming up. The problem is that it's always underfunded. So the Sámi Parliament, in total, all of the money going to the Sámi Parliament is less money than the government gives to the Norwegian Opera House in Oslo, to put it in context. And that says a lot. And then you add on to that we have to spend more and more energy fighting this, a little bit here, a little bit there, like land theft going on. I'm calling it theft because Supreme Court has ruled that it is theft. So I think that for this to mean anything, there are a lot of levels here of reconciliation, and for the individual reconciliation, I must say, some of the stories, and also the fact that even myself, having grown up with a mother that spoke Sámi to me, I was 18 years old the first time I dared speak Sámi with my own mother. And that's saying something about the society we've grown up in, even our generation. So it's something to have in the back of your mind. Yeah.
Maybe I can follow up. It's just to have a little positive story. Because on the personal level of reconciliation, I am doing a project in my own Sámi hometown, Moskawatna, and my grandmother, her generation is when the culture collapsed. So the end point of that is that you lose the identity yourself on the personal level. So she doesn't identify as a Sámi. And it's a lot of shame connected to it. Their generation didn't know about the Norwegianization policies, even though they were victim to it, like so many other places. And she's a Christian, and a lot of the culture went into their way of being a Christian, Læstadianism. And today, Læstadianism, the way they sing psalms is it's a pretty much yoik in there, but they don't recognize it always themselves. There's a lot of Sámi culture, even in the musicality of the way they speak Norwegian. So it's not gone, it's there. You just have to look for it and call it see that it's Sámi, And I've been working there and doing, I cannot yoik in the church there because she would be so offended because yoik is connected to the devil and all of her life, you know, all of the teachings from the priests and stuff. So I won't do that because I believe in a slower process of reconciliation. So I did it outside of the like main shopping, where you buy food, you know, in that small place. I did a concert this summer and I did like now, I played psalms and yoik side by side. And this changed my grandmother's perception of yoik. So now she's more open to it. Yeah, because she's only heard drunken Samis in her youths, which were dangerous, doing yoik, you know. But here's her grandson yoiking and doing psalms. And some of the people in her church even said that it was nice. So, okay, maybe it's more allowed. And you know, I talked to this old guy in my family. He was together with a woman, his wife. They've been together for, I don't know, 70 years. So he's really old. And he's starting to get a little bit to forget things, but he really, you know, remember the things of the past. And I talked to him about yoik, and turns out he's had a close relationship to the mountain Samis of that area. He's learned yoik in his youth, and all throughout his life he's been yoiking in the nature. But his wife didn't know because she's a Christian and yoik isn't allowed. And here I am sitting with this old man and his wife, and I'm asking him about it, and he starts to yoik. And you should see his wife. She's like, what is happening? Like, and then he says, yeah, I've been yoiking all my life in the nature. And she's like, I'm married with this man for 70 years. I didn't know that. So just by me being there, asking questions about it, it opens up discussions among my family and the elders, which they have never had before. And things are changing quite rapidly in my own family. My grandmother isn't that ashamed of being a Sami anymore. She enjoys when I do yoik, which is miraculous. And things are slowly changing, I think, and I try to be a part of that inside that small community. So, yeah.
Now, I'd like to follow up on something you both touched upon on this culture. I study culture. Took my master thesis wrote my master thesis in culture sciences. And I think that some culture scientists needs to sort of get on board here, because we're talking about making something that is written in political language understandable to people. But there is also another process that needs to be done to this text. It needs to be interpreted as a cultural text, as a cultural production, which it is. It is trying to represent our culture through political language, but we need to reinterpret it into cultural understandings of how to understand ourselves through this lens. Because an important part of Norwegianization, if you ask me, is exactly that sort of split of identity, where you make sort of rules, you apply rules, imagined borders in our heads of who we are allowed to be. As a young student, I worked in a cafe with people who are immigrants to Norway. And those people are the first people who made me feel really understood as a foreigner. I'm from the north of Norway. My dialect tells it. The first thing people ask me is often, are you Sámi? Because I happen to look Sámi by some weird criteria some racists made in the early 1900s. Most Sámi I know are tall and blonde. I'm not. I'm short, I'm round, I'm dark-haired, and I speak with a tough North Norwegian dialect. Are you Sámi? Some people don't even ask that. They yoik straight up to my face. Or even they heard that in Northern Norway it's okay to curse, so they curse to my face as saying hello. I shan't repeat any of those things. But the thing is that they are forcing my hand in choosing my identity. I couldn't be a Sámi in Northern Norway, even though I have known all of my great-grandparents spoke Sámi, and all of my grandparents spoke partly Sámi as children, and also partly Kven. I have known always. Yet I didn't know that we were the ones considered Sea Sámi, I didn't know that I could vote at the Sámi Parliament. I didn't know that, not until I started studying culture sciences here in Bergen, in Vestland, where people make fun of my dialect, where I'm the other. You have to experience being the other to understand it. It's when I was the only one, the only student. I studied, the last degree I took actually was a second bachelor degree, and I took it because I wanted to be able to say in writing that I know something of my own culture. So I took a degree in Sámi religion. And Sámi religion somehow is joined with ancient religions. So it's considered dead, as if we were dead. And I was sitting there on a school bench, hearing my thoughts explained to me. They saying, this is what the Sámi believed in the 1700s before they were destroyed, before their culture were eradicated. And I'm hearing my own thoughts spoken to me through my professor of what I believe right there. What I'm trying to say is that you cannot kill culture. Culture is much deeper than the yoik, than the gahti, than the language. There are feelings, emotions, your sense of disgust, what makes you angry, what makes you happy, what makes you love someone, what colors you like, the combinations, what is considered right and wrong, how laws should be made, what is natural, who is family. All of these questions are culture, how you feel that instantly this is the correct way. There are many people who find it strange that I live with my mother and husband and children. In the foreigners, the visitors, and the people immigrating to Norway, I meet again people who remember that sort of culture, as is also the culture I grew up with. Culture cannot be killed in a few generations. One thing I realized writing my degree was that when I was reading collected stories, Sámi fairy tales they're called, I was also reading a collection, a memory bank of Sámi religion. I could pick it up right there from those words. I knew exactly how to do the practices, what the gods were called, what is considered holy. It's there. And I'm thinking of things like agency. When we are disturbed by discussions of who is allowed to be and who is allowed to speak, we are not allowed to stop and think and feel what is here. What is it that makes me Sámi? It isn't my ability to speak a Sámi language. It is the way I exist in the world and my relations. And to be able to express them, I need to be acknowledged.
In a way, I'm speechless because I realize that, this is a written document and it's a report of many years of research by highly academic people, but I think it has set in motion some very important processes. And maybe more than the formal recommendations or the documentation of historical wrongs, it's like an awakening in a way. That people are becoming aware of their identities and proud of their identities. And I'm just hoping that this document, in its probably a brief form, is going to encourage good conversations in Norway about, the multiple dimensions of culture in this country. It's not a unicultural nation. It's not a Norwegian nation the way we want to think about it or have been thinking about it, but allowing for different voices, different backgrounds, different opinions, different strengths, different weaknesses, and different ways of living our lives with respect and tolerance. I think that is super important. And, we have to end in a couple of seconds, but do you think we're on a good track? I mean, do you hope that the process that has started is going to go in a good direction? I know there are many things that Fosen is not putting this in a good direction. But do you think overall that there is kind of hope for for cultural language and multiple identities in this country.
I will follow up on your beautiful notes in this, because I agree on that. If we shift the view on, you can talk about autonomy, but it's also deciding who we are and getting to decide who we are ourselves. So who has the definition power over who you are? And then that's you or me, for my instance. So what's next and what now in the Sámi society? And I agree wholeheartedly that it's actually written in the first Sámi novel, that there comes a day where people will be proud to be Sámi, and families that had forgotten it will remember it again. And I think that there's immense strength in that, because I believe you are completely right about the culture has not, even though the language might have been lost some places, and you talk about the things you understand, but you just don't know why you understand it. The silent knowledge, that is still there. And that means that our connectedness as a people has not died. So it's more about recognizing that and seeing that diversity again as a strength, because I think we have to, there is space and room for everyone. And that I think the split that we are talking about is, like you said, it's an illusion of the mind. And if we can address that as well, then I think at least the internal reconciliation has taken leaps. And I think we are headed there. It just, there are, I think, many times more people aware of Sámi people and culture also in the majority population these days than just 5 years ago, not to speak about 10 years ago. And a lot of the stereotypes are also being shattered, luckily, and hopefully it will go even faster. Yeah, so I think I end there, and maybe there's time for some last words.
Oh, so I also think we're going in the right direction, but I think it will take obviously some time. And I find it helps to think that we are a bigger community and that we are people from all over the world here, indigenous people, not indigenous people, and that, and I find also inspiration from South Africa, and the TRC report mentions actually a quote by Desmond Tutu. So if I can just read that: "Forgiveness does not mean condoning what has been done. It means taking what happened seriously and not minimizing it, drawing out the sting in the memory that threatens to poison our entire existence. At the same time, the report states that we cannot force anyone to forgive, and that it is possible to reconciliate without forgiveness." Yeah.